Hi team, how you doing? I hope this video finds you well. I hope this video finds you in good health today. May you have happiness and prosperity this day. May you have ease of being. And may your loved ones enjoy ease of being also. I'm about to hit the gym for the first time in over a year. It's been quite a while, and I'll explain why that is in just a moment. But I wanted to use this opportunity as it's happening in real time. It's a very real, practical example happening now about how spiritual awakening does not have to sap your motivation. This is a topic that seems quite prevalent recently, and I think it's quite a common question. It's certainly a common concern of a lot of spiritual seekers. This kind of worry that, but if I just become fully present and completely drop the story of me, if I relinquish my ego, if I resolve or remove my ego, and I just live entirely in the present, what happens to my motivation? What about my ambitions? Won't it be destroyed? Won't that go along with it? If there's no future, what happens to all my goals? What happens to all my dreams? This is a fair question. We should not dismiss or disparage seekers with that sort of question. It's a fair question, and it's been answered in many different ways over the years. But I just wanted to give just straight up demonstrate a very real, practical example of how in this instant, in this current situation, that actually the awakening and truly learning about Advaita and non-duality and truly embodying the realization, embodying the practice, is actually helping me to return to the gym. It's helping me to return to my goals. It's helping me to return to pursuing my overarching ambitions for this individual expression, this individual body-mind. So just to give a bit of context here, because you might be thinking, well, why is it a big deal? You're going back to the gym. Might be a lot of people, it's like, well, I've never been to the gym. Like, why is this a big deal? So if I give a bit of context about everything that led up to this point, right, in my my apparent story, my egoic story, you'll see why this appears to be very significant. So if you're new to me and you're new to the channel, you might not know my entire backstory. So here it is, a bit of lore. Buckle up, buckaroos, here we go. The deep lore on this one, the story so far. I was an alcoholic for 10 years. And when I say alcoholic, I mean it. It was as bad as it gets. I'll put some pictures up right here. And it got real bad. I mean, alcoholism's always really bad, but it got to the point where I was very sick, very poorly, and I couldn't hold down a job. My health was deteriorating to the point where, it was about to be fatal, essentially. I was obese, I was depressed, anxious, I was in despair. I was really at the end of my tether, so to speak. I was at death's door for a little while there, for 10 years. And when I was 28, I decided, so I was an alcoholic from the ages of 18 to 28. When I was 28, I realized that this was about to be curtains for me. It was about to be sayonara, and I didn't fancy that. So I made a decision that this isn't going to be me. I'm not going to go out like this. I'm not going down like this. This isn't going to be the end of my life. And I set about transforming myself. And I set about engaging in a process of personal development, a process of strengthening myself physically and mentally, emotionally. I set about engaging with therapeutic practices such as cognitive behavioral therapy. I engaged in physical training to get fitter and stronger, to burn away the fat so that I could be a healthy BMI. And I engaged in all of the materials around sobering up, how to live a life abstinent from alcohol, how to live a sober life. And it was a learning process. I went through years of trial and error about seeing what works for me. It was a process of transformation and growth and discovery and all that good stuff. It was like, you know, montages in films like in Rocky and stuff, when they go on that training montage, there's cool music behind it, and they're studying all the books, and then they're training with the weights, and then they're running out on the beach and stuff like that, and it's like, whoa. Or Karate Kid on the seafront with the sun setting, and they're there meditating. It was just like that. And I really mean it. There's a reason those montages exist, because in my experience, that's exactly how it went. And the problem is, it's not all. The montage only shows the highlights, right? It doesn't show the moments when you're in a low, when you're in despair. You feel like this process isn't working, or I'm not changing fast enough, or is this the right principle or process, or every setback, every failure, every defeat is going to happen. It's going to happen. But anyway, I'd set about, I'm one of those people, basically. I'm one of those really infuriating, irritating people who turn their life around and then can't shut up about it. That's me. Guilty. Oh dear. Sorry, team. I cannot help but make jokes sometimes. So, that's a bit of context there, because I set about trying as hard as I could to fix myself, to heal myself, to change myself. And it worked. It worked. I got better. I healed. I wasn't poorly anymore. And I'll put up the before and after transformation. Not only did I find that, because through the various practices, I engaged with the therapeutic practices and meditation and things, primarily to help me with my anxiety, depression. And the physical fitness and training helped as well. And eventually I looked into various things to do with the sobriety. Eventually I found Rational Recovery, which is a book by Jack Trimpey. And it outlined this method called AVRT, which is Addictive Voice Recognition Technique. And it was that technique that really turned the key in the lock, and I found a lifelong abstinence from alcohol method, right? There was the technique, that was me, found it, boom, done, ticked off, squared away, job's a good one, right? And went through all of that process, and in that process I developed a passion and a love for trying to take everything I've learned and experienced, and maybe I could package that into something of a career. So I chose to become a personal trainer, and I learned how to I went on all of the courses, the gym instructor course and the personal training course, and learning about the nutrition, the physiology, everything like that. And I became a personal trainer, and I use my journey to highlight that it's possible. That it's possible. You can change. You can heal. There's a lot of people that don't even know that's possible and are committed to not changing. They're the really scary people. So I say all of that because that's my story, right? That's my journey, so to speak. And I mean, listening to that, right, isn't there a huge amount of emotional weight to that? Isn't there a huge amount of narrative power to that? I mean, there's a lot of emotions in that. There's a lot of meaning in that. In that story, it's a very, I mean, Whenever I talk about it, whenever I talk about, well, that's what happened, it sounds a bit like a movie. It almost sounds unbelievable, but that's what happened. I've got receipts, right? That's what happened. So just understanding, because I'm about to bring this into how this all relates to spiritual awakening, understanding there is a great deal of narrative and emotional weight tied up in that story. And ultimately, all of that story forms part of my ego, which obviously I'm trying to resolve and distance from. But it's complicated, all right? It's complicated. Bear with me, because I'll try and pick apart what I mean by that in just a moment. Because you would hope that, hey, presto bingo, I lose all the weight, sober up, sort out my mind, become a personal trainer, and it's sail off into the sunset on horseback, right? Happy ever after. Happy ever after is how it goes in the movies, but unfortunately life is not a movie. I suffered a terrible back injury about 3 years ago, and it was agony at times. Every month something would twang in my back. If you've ever had one, you know what I mean when I say a twang. And I'd be bedridden for days, perhaps even a week, in agony. And I could just about get myself back on my feet, and tried to get back into the gym to do my personal training and my gym instructing, but then it would just twang again. And this continued for about a year. Ooh boy. And it resulted in a kind of chronic pain. And I've been to the doctors and they can't quite figure out what's wrong, and this, that, and the other. It's just, essentially, I've got a bad back. I don't know how else to put it. I've got a bad back. And it's no joke. It's no joke. I mean, I can kind of like make light of it. In hindsight, we can always look back with kind of maybe rose-tinted glasses a little bit and be like, oh yeah, that was pretty rough for a while. When I say it was pretty rough, I mean it was hell on earth for a while. Real tough, a real struggle. Now, sadly, I had to stop doing my personal training and my gym instructing. You know, it was and hopefully now I'm at a point where I'm starting to think maybe I can pick that up again at some point in the future, maybe. I don't know. Just don't know. But at the time, I was like, uh-oh, SpaghettiOs, this is a career-ending injury. And it was very difficult not to fall into despair. Very difficult. Now, naturally, it's been a huge hit on every single front in my life. We're looking at, you know, professionally, you know, my friendships as well. You know, all my friendships are tied socially. My friendships are tied up in the gym and my work and everything, and financially, obviously. So, if you want to help me out by joining a channel membership, that'd be real helpful. Thanks, because I'm still struggling to get myself back on my feet. So all channel memberships and donations are welcome. Sorry for the beg, but if you don't ask, you don't get, you know. And I'm still struggling to get myself back on my feet, but we're getting there. We're getting there. We stay optimistic. We stay positive and optimistic. We're gonna get there. We are going to get there. A setback is just a set up for a comeback, so to speak. And you're going to have these setbacks and these failures on the path, on the journey to recovery and on the spiritual path. So that's the setup, right? That's the narrative, right? That leads up to this moment right here. So at the start of this video, I mentioned I'm about to hit the gym, and it's been a while. It's been over a year. And naturally, if you don't know the story, that's not a big deal, is it? But if you know the story that I've just told up to this point, if you know that narrative, now you can see why when I say I'm about to hit the gym, for the first time in like over a year, you start to see why that might be a challenge to my psychological and emotional world. You can see why it's going to be difficult for me to walk out that door in a minute and walk into the gym where I had that injury for so long, where I was struggling to work, because it's a very physical job, gym instructing and personal training, and I was trying to do it with a chronic back injury that could ping at any moment. And if it pings, I'm in bed, can't work for days, and all the money lost from that, right? Imagine the trauma, right? And all of the associations that are tied up in that gym, right? And I'm going to see people I haven't seen for a long time. Everyone's going to want to know where I'm at. Everyone's going to want to know, like, where have you been? What's going on? Oh, what was that injury? How's it been? What exactly happened? Like, what's the exact injury, you know? And they'll all give their advice on the back end, all of that. I know all that's coming. Okay. So that's the narrative thus far. Just trying to bring you up to speed so you can see some of the dilemma here. And what I'd like to get to is to explain how actually the spiritual awakening, the non-duality, the Advaita, the realization is actually now helping me to go and hit the gym. It's not going to hinder me. You might think, well, hang on, if I'm only ever present and I'm fully awakened and I'm in that sort of, but I am just pure consciousness. I'm not the body. I'm not the body, I'm not the brain, I'm just pure consciousness. You might think, wouldn't that lead to a mentality where I don't bother going back to the gym? Wouldn't that lead to just having no motivation, no goals, no drive, no ambition, and there'd be no point going back to the gym? Why risk it? You know, it's going to be a risk. My back could twang again, you know? It's a risk. It is a risk. So this is a fair point. And I wanted to talk on this because there might be quite a few seekers out there that are hesitant to really do the deep dive into meditation and spirituality for fear that their motivation would disappear and they won't be able to engage with the world. So here's the key. Here's the crucial thing. Reality is not a story. The universe is not a story. You are not a story. I am not a story. And in the present moment, we find that things are often just not nearly as big a deal as they are in our head. The mind wants to turn things into a big deal. But the reality of the situation, it's not a big deal. If we look, so let's take two examples. Let's take the Corin who's highly invested in his ego, and let's take the Corin who is doing the best he can to remain in the spiritually awakened present state, right? If I'm invested in my ego, going to the gym in a moment is going to be a real struggle. Because if I'm locked in and fully mind identified, my whole body is going to be tense and tight, and so is my mind, and I'm going to be nervous because I have that entire past 20 years of my life carried around in my head. All of the meaning that's tied up in this. And I mean, physical training was a massive part of me sobering up and sorting out my mental health and just sorting my life out in general, becoming healthy. It saved my life, physical training. And if I'm all nervous about, am I going to be able to do this? How's it going to feel when I go to the gym? Maybe I won't ever be able to train again. You see how the old trauma will come back up to the surface. And that old trauma will be no good. That old trauma won't serve me in the gym today. It's engaging too much with that negative emotional charge will actually hinder my progress. This is an instance in which the story isn't going to help me. But if I'm fully present, without ego, without narrative, without story, the reality of the situation is that a guy is going to a gym to do a few back rehab exercises and is then going to leave the gym, have some lunch, and come home. So that second one, the second example there, is that a big deal? Is there any issue there? No, perfectly normal. Just that's all it is. That's all. So right there, we can see how dropping the narrative, dropping the ego, dropping the story, and remaining fully just in the reality, the pure reality of the here and now, you can see how, right? The perspective, the spiritual awakening, Advaita, non-duality, is helping me. It's not sapping my motivation. It's helping me to get back to the gym. Now you might ask, why bother going back to the gym? Because if you're fully present and you have no ego, you have no narrative, you have no story, what is the drive to go to the gym? Why bother? Now, fitness, as it relates to spiritual awakening and non-duality, is a different topic. We'll cover that at a later date. This is purely really to do with motivation itself, but I will cover how fitness kind of relates to it at a later date. This is just about motivation itself. Because you would think, well, isn't physical training like an egoic activity in itself? Isn't it like an arrogant thing? Aren't you like trying to get stronger and better, and like, isn't it quite a it's often seen as an egoic thing, fitness. But it's not. It's not. And it's a funny thing. The more you find inner peace, the more subtle your goals and drives become. They don't become so fierce and like, I need to achieve this. It just becomes more of a longer, overarching, more subtle aspiration. And sometimes I just check in with myself, and if I have a particular goal, I have a particular aspiration, like I've got goals for the channel, I want a certain amount of subscribers and members and all of that, of course I do, right? But I have to check in with myself and think, right, is this egoic? Is this goal trying to serve a purely temporary, finite, separate self that needs to achieve this in order to be a valid human being and to be loved and make money and get laid, right? Is it that? Or is this goal and aspiration in the service of the whole? Is this goal and aspiration in the service of just what's right and good and true and pure for all of reality? Is this serving Corin Bryant, personal trainer? Or is this serving Brahman, infinite universal consciousness? That's the kind of litmus test. I sometimes just check in with the two. And the fitness thing could be either. There's so many things. This is so interesting, right? This is so interesting. There are so many things. There are so many questions relating to behavior. How should I behave in relation to the spiritual awakening? And what makes it confusing is that it could be either. It could be either. Certain behaviors could be very egoic, or they could be they're just a natural expression of the individual being. It's to do with loads of different stuff, habits, everything, right? It's strange. And fitness could definitely be either. So some people do train in an egoic way, in quite a narcissistic way. They do it for narcissistic goals, very self-serving goals, right? As a method of trying to dominate others or try to be better than other people. Of course that happens. But it's also, is it not just common sense that it's good to be fit and healthy? I had to learn this. It's one of the things that I just had to learn. It's just a good thing to be healthy, physically healthy. And health is not subjective, health is objective. We know what health looks like, and we know it's a good thing, don't we? If we just, a huge part of this journey is just maturing up a little. Emotional maturity, spiritual maturity, just general maturity. We just got to grow up a bit. I've learned this at every step along the way. It's easy for me to say this now, right, looking back, but there were times it wasn't so obvious, but it becomes clear in time. I just needed to just get a grip, basically. It's what I needed to do for a lot of my journey. Isn't health and fitness just a good thing to do? It doesn't have to be egoic or tied into the story. I just know that when my cardiovascular health is kind of good and I've been lifting some weights, I've got some strength in the body, I feel lighter, I feel more energized, I feel more optimistic, I feel more positive, I feel more confident. It just feels healthy. We get the word health from the same place we get the word whole. Health and whole actually have the same etymological root. Wholeness, whole, and health, they're the same thing. So when I've been taking extra care to look after this body and mind feels more whole with the universe, the connectedness, the oneness with everything. It just does. So that's the motivation. That's it. It's subtle. It's not fierce, needing like headphones in, let's go, let's go, let's go. There might be elements of that because that's fun, it's enjoyable, why not? But just to explain a little bit, if you are worried about your motivation waning as a result of spiritual awakening, it doesn't go like that. It just doesn't. You may find that certain goals and aspirations do vanish, but that is just a sign that that goal or aspiration was actually egoic. That was actually in service of your ego, the service of the individual personal narrative, which is actually based on a false premise. So it's a good thing that that goal and aspiration vanishes. You may have always had in your head you want to earn a certain amount, meet a certain person, own a certain thing, have a certain size house, have a certain number of children, whatever, right? And as you go into your spiritual awakening, you start going, hang on, I just don't feel nearly as driven to achieve those things anymore. But it might turn out that actually you wanted those things because you were conditioned to believe that you wanted those things. You don't actually want those things. Not really. So spiritual awakening, in a way, drains the swamp. It burns away the egoic, deluded aspirations and goals. The aspirations and goals that you believed would make you happy. But they're not going to make you happy because the ego can never be happy. Why is that? Because the ego is made out of dissatisfaction. Its very substance is dissatisfaction. The ego is the seeker, and the seeker can never find. Why can the seeker never find? Because by its own nature, it is seeking. The ego is seeking a resolution to itself. And the problem comes when the ego seeks a resolution to itself through external means. It doesn't work like that. It can never quite have enough. The ego can never be validated. The ego can never achieve enough. The ego can never have enough. Hungry ghosts, as the Buddhists say. Ghosts with massive appetites but tiny mouths can never get enough. Can never eat enough in order to be satisfied. That is how the ego works. And that is why certain goals, aspirations do vanish in spiritual awakening, but that is a good thing. Why? Because they weren't ever your goal to begin with, not really. They were the goals of the fictitious story, the false narrative. That's all they were. They weren't real. These weren't your goals. So there may be an interim period where certain old goals, old patterns of belief, behavior, opinions and all of that does disappear, and you haven't discovered the new ones yet. You haven't discovered those new, more subtle goals, those new, more nuanced goals that are in service of the greater whole. Now, here's the beautiful thing. Here's the beautiful thing. Cheers. I mean, it's all beautiful, really, but here's the even more beautiful thing. You'll find that when you start behaving in a way that is more conducive to the goals of the infinite universal consciousness, the goals of, we could say God, we could say the goals of the universe, we could say the goals of Brahman, whatever. When you're aligned with that, you find that this illusory world, this Maya, actually starts to work with you rather than work against you. And this is why your goals never come to fruition. It's why you can never achieve them. Any egoic goal is doomed to fail. Why? Because the Maya won't allow it to happen. It is the frustration and stress we feel upon our plans not working out. That is the clue. That's the clue. So if we didn't fall into despair when our plans don't work out, this is now like the way I'm kind of perceiving things, is that this is why I had that back injury in the first place. It was the infinite universal consciousness sending me a very clear clue, a very clear sign, and saying, Corin, right, you are getting very stuck in your ego right now. You are suffering without realizing it. I'm actually going to pull you out of the gym because what you're doing is egoic. That's what that back injury was all about. It's also that whole area. There's a huge amount of stored emotional trauma tied up in that psoas muscle, the stress muscle. And I needed some time out of the gym. So I didn't have the gym as my little comfort blanket in a way. I couldn't distract myself. I had to go in and face it. I had to face my own shadow. So that was a clue, right? And the point is, the frustration that we find on, we're trying to get that promotion. You don't get the promotion. You try and meet the girl or guy. Doesn't happen, or they're all the wrong people. You can never seem to make enough money. Your health keeps failing. The whole thing is frustrating, stressful, right? That's a clue. If we don't fall to despair and instead go in the opposite direction and try to learn what the lessons are actually teaching us, can we learn what is contained? What's the clue here? Maybe it's not that there's something wrong with you. Maybe it's that the egoic game, the game of the Maya, inherently can never be satisfying. It just can't. The only satisfying thing that you can do is align with the universe. Just let go. Let go. Let go of your attempt to control the world. Let go of your attempt to control your individual body and mind. Just let go of all this, and instead, a sense of just listening. A sense of going along with the natural, gentle rhythm and flow of life, and find that the universe is guiding you in certain directions, and all you have to do is swim with the current. That's it. So as a real practical example of that, I'm about to rejoin the gym, but I'm going to rejoin in a much more subtle, relaxed way. I'm not trying to get shredded or jacked or like ultra fitness, and I will try not to have too much of my ego and narrative tied up in my physical fitness. It should really be that physical fitness and health is just a good thing, and that's all. It's not something I'm going to be getting any validation from the world for. And that was the mistake I was making previously. Because of that narrative weight. Let's just use this here as an opportunity. Hopefully there I've at least given some insight into how motivation may change during spiritual awakening, but motivation doesn't necessarily disappear altogether on spiritual awakening. It might shift and change, but you can see now that actually, if I was invested in the narrative, I wouldn't be able to go to the gym right now. It's too much. But if I remain present and aware, I can go and do a few light weights and rehab this back. Because if I don't, the back's never going to get better. It's time for a little strengthening. I hope I've managed to get something along those lines across. And as we're here, as we've developed the point up to this point, this is just interesting, I think. In my previous mindset, so we have alcoholic for 10 years, and I was in quite a hedonistic way of seeing the world. I thought life was just about partying and get as much pleasure out of life as you can, and quite nihilistic as well. I thought there was no meaning to life, there's no point. So I was hedonistic and nihilistic. And that was the main philosophy of my ego at that time. It was like a kind of nothing matters, so you might as well just party until you die, right? There's a lot of people like that, aren't there? Do you know people like that? It's a shockingly common mindset to be in, the hedonistic nihilist. And when I started to recover and I engaged in time for personal transformation, personal growth, personal development, and I removed alcohol and I stopped eating sugary and fatty processed foods and drinking full fat soda and all of that sort of stuff, right? And I ate chicken, broccoli and rice, the same stuff all the gym bros eat, right? I became a gym bro, basically. Drinking tons of water and only water, dropping all the bad habits, training every day quite intensely. I mean, that first couple of years, I was like a Shaolin monk. I was like a Marine. Honestly, I was your David Goggins, you know, I was on it, right? And I loved it. I loved it. And I engaged in that transformation I was doing. This is why I got into meditation in the first place, to sort out my anxiety and depression and stuff. But I would never have called myself spiritual at that time. I was just using meditation as a kind of cognitive behavioral technique. Right. The spirituality came later. Interestingly enough, the real awakening came sort of midway through the first year of my terrible back pain. Maybe I'll explain that in a moment. So I engaged in that, trying to recover from my hedonistic nihilism, right, by applying a kind of ascetic, however you pronounce it, practice. And if you're not familiar with that term, it's a spiritual practice where people deny the flesh. So ascetics will do fasting for very long periods of time. They will not consume any intoxicants. They just won't engage with the physical world at all. They just sit in meditation and endure extreme privation, extreme deprivation, in order to get closer to the divine. And this has been going on since the dawn of humanity. Humans have always done this, going on vision quests. And they go on vision quests by starving themselves, going out into the wilderness and enduring hardship, enduring suffering as a method of getting closer to God. Sometimes as a kind of penance. There might be something about that in there. So that's asceticism. And I also set about trying to rectify my usual habit of avoiding pain by going to pleasure. That was my old habit. That's why I was addicted to alcohol and food, binge eating. Because at the slightest hint of emotional pain or physical pain, I would seek to escape that pain by going to pleasure. That's hedonism. But this time, I escaped from the pain by going into the pain, by embracing pain, by choosing to face pain. And you can do that through the physical training for hours, burning muscles, sweating, through the fasting. So I'm eating less calorie deficit. I was hungry, grinding, striving, training, doing all of that. Hard work. And sat in meditation for long periods. No, not being distracted. I'm not going to Netflix. I'm not going to social media. I'm going to sit in meditation. Very Zen, very Shaolin monk, very monk-like for a long time. So that was asceticism and elements of stoicism, which is the sort of the acknowledgement, the accepting of pain. It's the saying, yes, life is hard. I choose to accept it. I choose to embrace it. Ascetic stoicism. So we went from hedonistic nihilism to ascetic stoicism. The first 10 years of my life in the hedonism, then the next 10 years of my life in asceticism. I wonder if there's anyone who's been studying any Buddhism at all who might recognize that story. 10 years of hedonism, 10 years of asceticism. Who does that sound like? Anyway, what I didn't realize, this is what I didn't realize, I'm going to hold my hand up, guilty again. I didn't realize at the time that the fitness thing, Corin Bryant personal trainer, look at me now, like I am the guy who transformed. I transformed my body and mind and I recovered from alcoholism. I didn't realize that was just a secondary ego. I thought I was getting rid of my ego, but it wasn't. I was just developing a new ego. That was, and it's so difficult to talk about this sort of stuff because it was good stuff. It's good to do all that training, you know. People can get inspired by that. People can get kind of motivated and become more optimistic and more hopeful as a result of seeing that story. But we also have to just recognize the pure truth at the end of it all. That was also ego. It's kind of hard for me. I'll have to take a big old bite of the old humble pie on that one because I'm like, oh, yeah, I guess it was. Dang, never mind. Because that also then brought me to this point, the point of true realization of just recognizing, oh, wow. Because by recognizing that, taking that big old bite of humble pie with no cream, right, bit dry, taking that bite, you go, right, so I'm not going to make that mistake again. No ego can be created that is going to result in lasting happiness, fulfillment, health, prosperity. No ego is ever going to do that. And my old habits, I mean, now I want to start making another ego, like a spiritual ego. You know, the previous two egos didn't work. I need to find a new ego. No. I've seen the game for what it is now. You see, this is how the cycle of samsara, this very tempting cycle of samsara goes. Maybe I can learn everything from the last ego and make a new, better one. You see the trap? There's no better ego. All egos are made out of dissatisfaction. All egos are made out of trying to get away from that initial core pain. We need to just go to that initial core pain. And for me, I discovered through shadow work, to no small amount of surprise, there was a lot of repressed shame, a lot of repressed resentment, a lot of repressed rage. Everything, it was all there. Nest of snakes right there at the bottom. I was like, ooh. But then upon that recognition, it was like, okay. When you can accept, integrate, and just allow those deeply repressed emotions to the surface, and just become comfortable in their presence. They're never comfortable in themselves, but you're just comfortable in their presence. Doesn't matter, there's shame again, okay. Oh dear, that's it. You're no longer trying to escape it. You don't need to do 10 years of hedonism. You don't need to do 10 years of asceticism. You don't need to do anything. Just this. And so it is this very just thisness that means I'm about to get up, go out that door, gentle walk to the gym, and do the gentle rehab exercises that the physiotherapist has instructed me to do. I don't need to bring the weight of 20 years of ego into the gym with me. That can stay in here. That can stay in the camera SD card. I hope that's given some clarity to the motivation question. I just wanted to give a very real example, because we often look at, we're often looking at these ancient scriptures, or hearing the ancient teachings, or watching the YouTube video, or reading the book or something, and it speaks in very broad philosophical terms, just overarching philosophical terms and concepts and ideas and general ways of looking at things. I just wanted to give a very concrete example of how this works in the field, how Advaita works in the field to improve your life. If I was stuck in ego, I wouldn't be going to the gym right now. It would be too much to face. But in the present awareness of being, in the spiritually awakened perspective, there is no big deal. I'm not invested in that outcome either. That's the other thing. You're just no longer as invested in the outcome. It's good if it works out, and it's good if it doesn't. C'est la vie. The worldly hopes man sets his hearts upon turns ashes, or it prospers, and anon, like snow, upon the desert's dusty face, lighting a little hour or two, then is gone. Omar Khayyam. So drop the ego and see what motivation remains. What are you actually called to do? And it's worth checking in with the small, quiet voice of intuition, as Adyashanti puts it. Small, quiet voice of intuition. It just guides you gently. Are you really in the right career? What's going to happen to your motivation to become the CEO of the company you're in? Probably will go away. Why? Because nobody wants to do that. Who'd want to be a CEO of a company? No thanks. That would suck. That would suck. What you actually want to do is start that windsurfing coaching business. That's what you actually wanted to do. That's what the 8-year-old you wanted to do. It's just along the way you kind of got lost and, oh yeah, I need all that stuff that I got told to want. You don't want to danny that. I don't want to do that. You want to start that windsurfing coaching. That was the thing that really got you inspired and excited. Follow that. You will find it just unfolds naturally. Thank you so much for watching, team. As I say, don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you have resonated with anything I've said today. And naturally, again, sorry for the beg, but I am in a little bit of a pickle with regards to my career. So anyone wanting to join or gift any donation would be greatly, greatly appreciated. Everything's going to go in the right way. I'm just needing a little step forwards to just get back on my feet properly. And wish me luck. Wish me luck as I go to the gym and I've got to do light stuff. See, my ego wants me to push. My ego wants me to grab the 20 kg dumbbells. But I know, I've been instructed by the physiotherapist, no heavier than 2 kg dumbbells. And I've got to do all these stretches and body weight stuff and glute exercises and bridges. The boring stuff. I've got to eat my vegetables. Got to eat my vegetables before I have my dessert. So let's get to it. Thank you for sticking with me, team. And if you're a new subscriber, I appreciate every single one of you. Thanks for listening. Now you know a little bit more about my journey as well. That's where I'm coming from with all of this, because I'm sure there's more than a few people that are quite confused, because I used to be talking about the diet, the nutrition, and what are we going to do about weight loss and sobriety, and now I'm kind of throwing in all this spiritual awakening stuff. It's like, Corin, I came here to lose a couple of pounds. What's this about transcending the limits of a finite human mind? This is quite a shift in pace right here. So bear with me, because hopefully as I get more back into the fitness, I can give a bit more advice on the nutrition and stuff, and the training and the sobriety and everything. And I do have, I'm hopefully soon going to be making a video on how fitness relates to the spiritual awakening. Is it even necessary? Do we need to look after the body anymore in spiritual awakening? Or how does that work? I think you can probably guess what I'm going to say, because I've kind of said it all in this video. Anyway, I've waffled on for too long. Sorry for all the tangents. Thank you for watching. Take care. Be well. And stay present.